mystery of black and white, and on behalf of the black and white group, we also do a lot of black and white photography. In my case, my photography has evolved to the point that I only really like black and white photography. So to that effect, I just want to present my point of view as far as black and white photography is concerned. Whatever I would probably present may not be universal. It cannot be, because the type of craft we are in does not really warrant that type of fixation on anything other than, of course, the technicals. In this presentation, what I really wanted to do was to move away from quoting people or looking at their photographs and trying to sort of explain why they have done it or why we should do it the way that they have done it and so on. I thought I'll make an attempt to portray black and whites as I see, the way I see it, and the way I would like somebody to see a photograph of mine. What I'll do is I'll try to avoid going through these standard quotes, which of course I couldn't help but just present to you, because I thought that might necessarily create a starting point of people who have more advanced skills and who would sort of gone more to depth in black and white would have said. So as you can see, there is a quote which says black and white is an abstract and color is not, and so forth. Looking at black and white photography, you are looking at a strange world. We all know that, because our eyes are not really akin to seeing things in black and white. You immediately see the color that is missing, or what is missing, which is the color. And here's another quote which says black and white always looks modern, whatever that word means. So it's just a juxtaposition of being modern and whatever that word means. Black and white, we know, sort of transports you into a different era in a manner if it is presented that way. But here, this person, Carl Lagerfeld, feels that it looks more modern, but he's not sure of the word modern. Color is a delight for the eye, but to see in black and white is a delight for the soul. I've sort of heard so much about this fact that black and white appeals to your soul, to the point that I am just wondering where my soul is. How would you define somebody's soul? I really don't know. So we need to go in search, we need to go on a journey to find the soul, I suppose, to understand black and white. I don't know if that's really the meaning of this quote, but I mean, taking it as it is with due respect to the author, he says that black and white appeals to the soul, color appeals to the eye. And Andrew McLean, as you see, feels that the world is in color. Of course, that's obvious. You have to work at black and white. I think that is important. That is a sort of a fundamental thing. And I would say that that is something that I agree, and that would sort of underlie in my presentation, the fact that you got to work on black and white. Firstly, I would say that you work on black and white in a manner that whatever you do is like 50-50. I would explain what 50-50 in this case is. 50-50, or I'll just leave it to a later time when I sort of go to the presentation, I'll explain. But the fact that you got to work at black and white, and the foundation for black and white necessarily is in you. Creating black and white, you need to first work within you, I feel, to see things in black and white so that you can produce them so that other people would enjoy seeing. So once again, another analogy. Color is descriptive, black and white is interpretive. In this case, interpretive means that it lets you interpret the picture in the way you want. It takes you on a, as I said, a little journey, and every time probably, I mean, if it's a fantastic picture, every time you look at a picture, you may go on a different journey, and those are how the pictures, some of those great pictures in the world keep on living. They take you on a journey every time that you look at it. At least that's the way I feel. Right, so as I said, this 50-50 thing, we need to understand what really can black and white be. We know that black and white is the absence of color. The question is it just the lack of color? Would a picture or a photograph that is made, if it doesn't have color, would it be a black and white image? This can be discussed, this can be argued. Or do we call it like a monotone or a monochrome image? Of course, we know that monotones cover a lot of ground. Monotone means any color, technically, just one color. So it couldn't be that. Then can it be a grayscale? right? So what is a grayscale? If you ask ourselves what is a grayscale in a technical level, and then we know that it's like an intermediate color between black and white, what we call a neutral color, meaning that it's really a color without color, like black and white. So what does a grayscale have as against a black and white image? So what is a grayscale? Grayscale is just an image that comprises of shades of gray, contrasting from black to white. And each pixel represents only an amount of light from black, which is the weakest. You also heard the word cyan, which is a greenish blue evoked by lightness in between, lying in between blue and green. So we need to understand what really would black and white be. This is something that I would go by, which says that black and white photography is where each position of the image can record and show a different amount of light, but not a different hue. So a different amount of light, but not a different hue. What would that mean? So there seems to be a difference between light and a hue. Can a color picture have light as well as hue? Can a black and white picture have only light but not a hue? So what is a hue? A hue is really is the main property of a color, or simply put, a particular point in color which produces a particular shade or a particular stimuli of a shade in our brain. Now, in our normal world, a hue would be a pure pigment. Now, if you're a painter, hue will be just one pure pigment, and you add black or white to get the different tints or shades. But in photography, we are looking at projected images. It gets a little more complicated. So we have, as you know, the hue, saturation, brightness sliders, the hue, saturation, lightness sliders, and so on, which creates all those millions of colors. So black and white photography necessarily does not have a hue. It just records different amounts of light at different positions of your photograph. Now, this is important because this would lead you to understand that in black and white photography, light is a very important aspect, and light and what it would create. Let's go into that a little later. So, what really makes a difference between black and white and color? Apart from the technical aspects of not having a hue, not having a color, not necessarily being grayscale, not being monotone, not being monochrome, which is of course a wide area, black and white is a part of it. We are necessarily working with light and shade, representing to the viewer a picture or an image that is purely made of a negative color. Let's try to understand that negative color with light variations. That's all. That's a black and white image. There's nothing more to it. So you go one step further. Now, that is at a technical level. But when you get a little more emotional, or when you play your soul thing, as I said, to bringing that aspect to it, then we come in and ask, okay, what really is the difference? Is it only that the lack of color or hue? Or what is it? When we look at it, what happens? What is the difference we feel? Is it more subtle and more interpretive? As I said, you go on a journey. A great photograph would always take you on a journey every time you look at it. It keeps on living in you, and the photograph lives. Is it more realistic and more surreal? Or less realistic and more surreal? Less informative, withholding some information. And it creates these evocative feelings about the fact that what is lacking. But on an emotional level, then it really sort of leapfrogs into a different level. Or is it so? I don't know. I mean, this is personally the way I feel it. You're free to disagree with me. Let me just present your image just to prove what I have been saying up to now. So this was an image I shot yesterday. As you can see, the settings are on the screen. I used my Nikon C6 on manual mode. I used my prime lens. I generally only use prime lenses at 7.1. Shutter speed, you see it. ISO, you see. Metering is center weighted, and I used one little light, Godox light, reduced to 1/64, just at an angle of 30 degrees. For those who are interested in Oriental music, I'm sure they will recognize who this is. This is Mr. Amarasiri Piris, who started his career as a musician, as a violinist. What I wanted to do, the way I lit this image, I say finally produced it, I wanted to show the fact that he's deeply engrossed in what he's doing. But I didn't want to tell was, I just wanted the viewer to figure out what on earth is he doing. He's certainly playing a tune. Is it a sad tune? What is it? What is his feeling? What is his thoughts? So I just held something back Of course, the question is whether my intention, whether it works, whether the viewer would look at it that way, or whether I'm too revealing, whether somebody would be able to recognize this person, who he is, because that also adds to the picture, and so on. So if we move on to try to capture this soul thing, this emotional quotient or whatever we call it, I think how you can bring it out necessarily is, while we know that at a technical level, these not there, that is not there, hues are not there, and so on and so forth, that element that really captivates you would be, I believe, necessarily through lighting, because as I said, a black and white picture is nothing but levels of lighting represented on a screen. So you really need to understand the importance of lighting in black and white. And as I have said, you've got to see the light and feel it. Feeling the light and seeing the light, I believe, are two different things. I'm still trying to figure out what, but I just the way I feel about it. So lighting is extremely important and a critical element in black and white. And lighting creates the contrast, which we see, the contrast that creates that mystique, mystery in black and white. You should not necessarily be intimidated by black in a picture or the white. Of course, in a manner that you know, or just lose detail. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. Now we are talking about a framework where you have control of what you produce. Then you have the elements. Of course, elements are common to any picture, but in black and white, the elements of a picture are, I think, critically important. We all know elements can be lines, vertical, horizontal, or shapes, whatever they could be, two-dimensional objects, and so on. And you can have you have form in pictures. You have texture. Texture is a very critical element in black and white. And I'll show you some examples of texture. Texture brings out the details on object and makes it rustic or soft. It just places the picture in front of you in a manner that it communicates with you. Then you have patterns in a picture. I mean, these are common with this color or black and then of course you have space. Space, once again, is an important element in a black and white picture. Then one of the other key elements or ingredients of black and white is emotion. How you would bring out emotion and how would it play on your viewer. Think about it. How would a viewer feel when he sees a black and white picture? Which of course brings us to the subject. When I say subject, I mean whatever subject or subjects. I mean, it could be a scene, a scenery, couple of people, one person, a portrait, anything, but just call it subjects as a common term. So what are you doing? What really are you doing with the raw material that you're going to make the picture with? Would it bring out a nice black and white picture? Would it help you to bring out a nice black and white picture, or would it not work? So these are the things, these are the elements that you need to really think about when you think of going into you're making a black and white picture. But still, I feel that there is one more element that really makes a picture or creates that mystery of black and white, which is sort of amalgamation, the grouping of all these elements. And I think that is necessarily the void, as I said, what is held back in a black and white picture. Of course, we know that lack of color creates a void, and we like to see color, and then we tend to fill that color with strong interpretations, which are unique to each person, right? Of the visual image. And all these elements which mixed up, which creates this void, craftily manipulated and, as I say, represented, can create nice mystery and a timeless beauty on a black and white photograph. Please don't ask me how this is done. I'm still trying to, these are just the way I feel, and I think gives me a sense of meaning to look at black and white like this. But of course, it's just my way of looking at it. I need to qualify that. And there would be people who would say, no, it doesn't work for me like this. For us, black and white is different. But as I said, personally, this is the way I feel that magnetic attraction, which is brought out some of the fantastic black and white photographs that I see, which leaves us totally artistically inspired. So The question is, I really don't know what comes first. Whether you see the void, whether it's the void in a picture, you see something in black and white, and then you just shoot it, and then the other elements play. Or whether you use the elements to create this void and you enhance your works. Has to be holistic in the sense it should really embrace and enhance your work. Otherwise, I don't think that black and white necessarily would work. That's the way I look at it. Having said all this, let's just talk about a few things that I believe I practice in black and white, and I try to sort of basically focus on. Some of the do's and don'ts of black and white from my point of view. I know that a lot of people who produce black and whites use filters. But the thing is, I feel that you need to have a reason to use a filter on a photograph. I mean, you just have a photograph, you look at it, you think, oh, these are nice color photographs, but then it might look better in black and white. So you just go to Nick, play around with the different and then you feel, oh, it's nice, it looks, I really don't think that that is the way you should do it. You should know, you should have that feel that, okay, this is a black and white picture, and this is going to work great. This has this lovely contrast, this has these lovely patterns, this has these lovely shapes, shadows, and so on. We should make a great black and white picture. So I'll try different ways of converting it to black and white. I might try it in Photoshop. So I use the black and white layer or the filter, or just desaturate it, or go into these other programs which are add-ons, which give you a wide variety of setups, which just present you with different settings, which you can choose, which you would like. So I think, please, before you use a filter from a program like Nick, think about it, use it with reason. Then the question always said is, you shoot with color and then you convert, then you have more flexibility. I have no problem with that, but I don't do that. I don't do that simply because I like to see what I would output finally in black and white. That helps me to understand whether the picture has some value in black and white or not. You put your mind, you open your eyes to black and white. As I say, you open your third eye to black and white, and you just get on that mood. You get on that trailer that takes you on this black and white journey. You don't want to see any color anymore. For me, I just want to get into that mood, that framework, and just shoot black and white. I turn my camera into black and white or the monochrome mode, and just need to sort of keep focus on what I like. Maybe I just like it that way. I like to see things in black and white. Keep it on raw because you're playing with light if you really want to put out a black and white picture, because you need that information. Bits of information that finally creates your picture on the computer. It's not like, the manual film photography that was there. So you need to preserve. Information is necessarily a raw material. So you need not to blow out or to burn out. So you need that stuff. So make sure that you shoot raw, which will give you more control when you're processing or when you're trying to save or retrieve an image. And certainly the raw file will have. Filters, different opinions, but I don't think that filters, physical filters which you fix on the lens, you have the red, the green, and the blue. And we know that the blue filter necessarily darkens the reds, and green brightens all the greens, and the red darkens the sky and the blue elements, and it brightens the red. But the thing is, what it does is plays it light. Now, black and white necessarily is a luminance thing. You need your luminance. So if you try to use filters and then produce black and white images, I really don't know how well it will work, but best thing is not to get too complicated. Don't do it. Other thing about black and white is why I say, if you look at color, look at shooting color, and then you want to convert to black and white, the problem would be you wouldn't really understand how shadows will work in your final production. When I say shadows, it's not necessarily physical shadows of people or buildings or whatever. Shadows could be dark areas. And shadows, when you convert a color picture into black and white, shadows have an oversized impact because shadows become a major element of your composition. Sometimes it can add to your composition, or it can just make it totally useless. So keep in mind impact of shadows that could have an impact on, or it does have an impact on your final output. And also contrast we spoke about. Now, contrast also has an impact on proximity. I'll show you a picture. If you have a strong contrast, in the sense more light on an image, on an element of your picture, it looks as if it is more closer to you than the others. So it has an impact. So contrast is not only to bring things out, but it has a way of affecting the 3D-ness of your picture. Tones, high key, low key, that's something that is common knowledge. You have a light picture with sort of a very soft, with a lot of softness. That's called high key, and then a low key is a bit of a, for explanation's sake, sort of a darker or a less exposed sort of a thing. Shapes become very prominent because black and white is a collection of shapes. Because you don't have color, it's shapes that create the picture, either it's simple or complex. So in the absence of, as I said, color, they really become key. And to shapes in black and white, you necessarily get drawn. They just anchor. Sometimes they make it complex, but sometimes it really makes it simplifies a black and white picture. So that's the importance of shapes and of course the texture of the picture, whether it is with a lot of grain or without grain, and how it is presented. I have a few examples of all this I'll show in a minute. So these are some of the things which you can use making your pictures, and these are some of the things that of course I use. The rest of the presentation would be a little more interesting because I'll try to talk less and show some pictures. One more picture I shot of Mr. Amarasiri Piris yesterday. Once again, you would see that I'm just trying to bring the emotion out of the man. I took this. It was basically during a conversation. If I remember right, he was at this point of time. He was explaining something about one of his songs, and he gets very passionate and emotional and engrossed. He feels very strongly about his work, and I just wanted to bring it out. I have the settings for the techies there. Okay, so what on earth is this one doing here? As I said, sometimes we shoot in color and then we feel that a picture will look good in black and white. You just want to go ahead and convert it. You just feel it. It's contrasty. It has a lot of light and shade. And the lines, the patterns are very clear. It's very definitive. So this was one of the pictures I thought would make a good material for a black and white for this presentation. This was something that I shot some time back. So I used a conventional method of doing it. I went into Photoshop. I took the same frame, the same composition, no cropping. Firstly, no, I use a black and white filter. And then I use the curves to, play a little around the light and shade on this. Yeah, that's all. So I feel that it came out quite well. So it really works also. So for all the people who say, no, shoot in color, then you have a color picture. And then if it is okay, you go into, you just convert it black and white. So you're more flexible. I guess, as I said, nothing universal, no fixation on anything. It's just, it's not necessarily free for all because we are the technicals to understand, but rest of it, yes, it's your call. The way I would like to present black and whites, it's not necessarily like this. My take on this, how I would sort of necessarily make this picture, produce this picture finally, would be like this, where I would want, as I say, I love to try at least to hold something back. But in this case, you saw the color picture, you saw the other picture, so probably the impact is not as strong. But just to demonstrate, this would be the way I would do it. Then let's look at a totally different picture. Once again, moving away from sort of a tight portrait type of thing. What happens when you have a lot of shapes, lines, as I say, textures, where you need to sort of, how would I say, a bit of a more complicated picture, so many elements in it and so on. Works well in color also, I believe. I just thought, okay, let's see what happens when we convert this. It has a big dynamic range, as you can see. You can see the shadows in the foreground on the bottom, and sort of a leading, not a leading line, a way of sort of pointing to the girl through the slippers. Her mom is on the right. She's also doing some work. Let's see what happens to her when she loses her color. Now, this is what I said. You need to understand the fact that when you take the color off, so many other elements come into play. So many other elements start dominating. And then you may feel that, okay, it's too much of things. Like somebody said to Mozart, too many notes, just cut off some, So like that, probably color, yeah, this frame looks okay. But in black and white, maybe. But I don't know, it just sort of loses its mystique and just presents a very standard picture. And you just think this house can be anywhere for that matter. It can be just in Colombo or not necessarily in Sigiriya. But if you really look at this picture, you know that no, there is something really more to this. This is something, it's not just a hut or something which is along the road or something. So really this picture works in color, isn't it? So this is the thing, you need to understand the subtleties, the nuances of, and the question you would ask me, so what happens? So you're such a black and white freak, or you assume yourself so, and you won't shoot a picture like this? Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid question, and I can assure you I have no answer to that. So we spoke about what black and white is and what grayscale. We spoke about grayscale. Grayscale is a picture which has, you know, a continuum from black to white, black the weakest to the white, the strongest of light. So I would say that this is not necessarily a grayscale picture. I would try, I mean, personally, in my case, I would try to avoid, I mean, I don't necessarily do black and whites in this manner because I feel that, I mean, in a manner, it helps you to identify, and it's a good picture to give a sense of location, information. I think you can figure out where she is necessarily for people who would know she would, you know, and so on. But I still feel that wow thing that really just what pricks your heart, I mean, or whatever soul captivates your soul. It's just a sort of a bit of a flat picture which doesn't necessarily give that light and contrast. But of course, this is something which people do, which is very nice. And so we spoke about filters, and I thought I'll just show you the impact of color. Now, this is not necessarily a photograph through a red filter. Anybody who who knows photography would tell me don't talk rubbish. Of course not. This is just a picture taken while a red light color wash is on this person. And this was taken. So just to demonstrate the impact of converting something which is red into black and white, this is how it comes. And you would see that red is very kind on the skin tones, and it makes it nice and smooth. So I'm sure ladies would love it. But still it retains a certain amount of detail. It doesn't distort, or it doesn't sort of even out what the picture is about. It holds to the message of the picture, I guess. Not too bad. So this is a picture which is the closest to blue that I had. Of course, this is not blue. And once again, it's not necessarily of a filter. It's just the color of light, the color wash that fell on this girl at this particular time. And let's see what happens to her. Looks to me that it has come out better. These are just straight conversions, black and white filter on Photoshop. Nothing else, no tweaking, no color, no light improvement, exposure, nothing, just straightforward. So this is not too bad. I mean, I feel that the black and white on this looks better because it brings the girl out. Here, she just gets blended out with the rest of the people who have, you know, the violet light on them. And in this case, she looks much better represented, and you sort of connect with what she feels, whatever she's doing. So here you go with a light that falls. Green, you know, is a strange sort of a color of using a filter. It sort of tends to darken stuff, darken most of, because 50% of what we see is green on a day-to-day basis because of the trees and so on. 50% of in Sri Lanka, very soon it will be zero. But so if we convert that, you find that you need to add a little more light, but still quite kind to the photograph, the conversion. Just to demonstrate, you know, about how color, the lack of color, and how it feels, and how, you know, it looks on when you convert photographs to black and white. So as I said, contrast, light contrast can also affect the proximity. I mean, looking at this picture firsthand, you would think that this guy who's having his arms raised is in front of the rest of them, but not really. They are all in one line. But due to the fact that he has more light on his body, he looks to be more closer to you. So this is another very key element in black and white photography. You can sort of play around if you need to, or you can sort of create that visual impact using contrast. Here again, these two girls look to be quite closer to you, but they are not, but they have more light on them. In fact, the guys who are, you know, below are much closer to the frame or to the camera. But these girls look sort of closer to you. So this is what light and contrast, light and shade can do to a black and white picture. But in color, what happens is this gets sort of neutralized because colors start to play on you. And as I said, shape plays a big role in black and white. You got to keep in mind that because you don't have color to create those shapes, it's got to be created through light and shade, and presented in a understandable manner. So keep in mind that in your photography, black and white photography, keep in mind shapes, and they have to be, you have to make sense to the viewer. You can't have a lot of stuff which is black, white, gray, whatever, and interplay and so on, crisscrossing, which probably would confuse. In that case, you might need color to sort of create those definitions. But if not, you have a picture like this, which can, immediately convey what on earth is going on. She's just enjoying herself. We all know that, and it just works great on a black and white. And as I said, texture. If shape creates the bigger picture, texture, creates the small element, the more subtle element, and that also comes into play quite a bit on a black and white picture more than a color. So remember that too, right, Ranmali? That's it.